You know, in France, they don't say I love you. They say omelette du fromage. And I think that's really beautiful. Do you ever wonder why some ingredients are way more expensive than their cheaper counterpart? I don't. I just grab the cheapest one. But perhaps there's more to it than the fancy packaging, or perhaps there isn't. I got here some butter. One costs twice as much than the other. Is it worth it? Maybe we can find out. And what better way to test butter than making some croissants or crescents for you filthy casuals? What better way to showcase our butter to have 27 layers of it in between flaky, puffy pastry goodness? Now, making croissants may seem like a daunting task, but following a few guidelines is quite straightforward and not that difficult. Fun fact, croissants were actually the first baked goods I ever learned how to make. So if I can do it, you can do it. I believe in you. And so you're gonna wanna start off with a mixer or two. We gotta make 2 batches here so we could compare our butters. You could also do this by hand, but why would you? Now each of these batches should make anywhere between 12 to 15 croissants, depending how big you like your garçons to be. But to start off with one batch, we're gonna need 500 grams of bread flour, 60 grams of sugar, 10 grams of salt, 10 grams of instant yeast. Give that a little whirl. 260 grams of cool water. And if you want more of a soft texture, you could use milk, but I prefer water. It gives much more of a flakier texture. But do whatever you want. 2 egg yolks. We'll save the whites for the egg wash. Then we'll slap this in our mixer with a dough hook and give it a whirl. Then once our dough starts to come together, it should look like this. We are going to add in 50 grams of room temp butter into the mix. Let that coat our dough. There you go. And while that's going, I'm going to start measuring and making the other batch. Alright, so let's check on our dough. You know it's done when past the stretch test. Pull it apart, see, we got some dough. Let's see some light through it. This is good. This one, same thing. Gluten's developed, our dough is ready. So we yank these out, plop them on the table. Alright, so we got both of our dough balls. All we need to do, roll it into a dough ball. Oh yeah. Got 2 nice hot dough balls, to which we're going to transfer into a greased bowl. We will use this white one for our expensive butter. Bad boy in there. And then just regular stainless steel for our poverty butter. And one little trick here, we're just going to put a score, an X or a plus, whatever angle you're looking at. This will help shape this into a square when we get back to it tomorrow. Something like that. Sure. Just want to cover this with some saran wrap and we'll place it in the fridge. Now the next thing we need to do is make our butter block, which consists of butter shaped in a block. So how we're going to do this? We're going to grab some wax paper, about yay large. Next we're going to measure out 4 inches using your tool of preference. I like using the vernier for precise measurements. So that's about 4 inches there. Just gonna make a fold at 4 inches, like arts and crafts. All right, 4 inches there. So we have a 4x4 inch square here, to which we are going to layer in about 250 grams of our butter. Luckily, this one is exactly 250 grams. We want to cut out our large rectangle into a flatter rectangle. Kind of just want everything in this square here. So let's just try. Oh, this is gonna be messy. If your butter's a little bit warmed up, this will help this process ever so slightly. So something like this. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna fold this and basically create our block of butter. Something like that. Roughly 4x4 of a square. Then using a rolling pin of some sort, we are just gonna lightly tap this together so we have one nice cohesive square of butter. We can double check our measurements to make sure it's about 4 inches. If it's not exact, not a big deal. It's just bread with many layers of butter. All right, perfect. So we've created our large rectangle into a nice flat 4x4 rectangle. So now I'm gonna have to do that all over again with our poverty butter. All right, so now we got both of our butter blocks ready to go. Probably label them so we don't get them mixed up. Let's just put some dollar bills on this one, and this one a 1-cent sign. So what's the deal with these butters? Of course, different quality of milk from the feed and the cows will produce different flavor profiles, but the biggest difference between these two butters is the butterfat content. This one here is at 84% butterfat, while this one here is at 80%. While that might not seem like a lot, it very well might not be, but that is a premium for that extra 4%. And will it make a difference? Stay tuned to find out. Like, come back tomorrow because we're gonna let this sit in the fridge overnight with the dough, and we'll get back to it in the morning. And we're back. We've let our dough rest overnight. As you can see, they have doubled in size. All we need to do is deflate it. Get it on our table. So using that cut we did last night, flatten it out. It's kind of hard to see. So this will help shape into a square. Let's grab our butter blocks. We're gonna need to roll each of these out to about double the size of our butter block. So about 8 by 8, I think so. Doesn't have to be a perfect square, although it does help if it is. Grab the corners, yank on it. Not bad. That seems to be the right size. Sure, I think that works. Same thing for this guy. So the next thing we need to do is we're gonna encase our dough with our butter. And we're gonna lay our butter this way. All right, so all we're gonna do is we're gonna pause that. Sidebar, I actually made an error of judgment on that. It was early in the morning, okay? Our dough square was actually a little too big. Ideally, it should be this size, just enough to cover the butter. Don't worry, this is all a part of the script. Pull each corner to encase our dough, encase the butter. Flip it over. All right. From here, we are slowly gonna roll this out long till about 3 times this length. Sprinkle some flour just ever so gently. And so when we're rolling this out, we want to make sure our dough and butter is around anywhere between 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That will ensure the proper temperature to roll it out without breaking or melting. It's a good in between. So now we have our doughs rolled out. They're not perfect. Don't matter. Life's not perfect. So all we're going to do is we're going to just do a trifold. Basically, we're going to lift one side up here, get it down to about 2/3 of the way, and then we're going to get this one over here. Slightly tap this so it's one cohesive piece. Same thing with this guy. And we're going to cover this. All right, let's give this another label so we know which is which. So this is our first fold. We're gonna need to do this 2 more times, but in between folds, we're gonna need to let our dough rest. So we're gonna put this in the fridge for at least an hour. If you got things to do, it could take 4 hours. You can get back to it tomorrow, I guess. But we just need to let it relax before going back to this 2 more times. All right, so it's been about an hour now. Our dough should be well rested. You can see our dough is rising, which is a good thing. That means our yeast is alive and well. So basically, we're gonna do the same. Sprinkle some flour on our work surface. And again, we wanna make sure our dough is around 60 Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius, then we're good to go. So since we folded our dough this way, now we're gonna roll it out this way so we could fold it the opposite way. Give it a little tap, let that air out. Get this in the fridge for another hour or so, and then do this one more time. Time for our last fold. As you can see here, some of our butter chunks have, chunky. That just means I did not do a good job with the butter block, meaning I didn't squish them down enough for it to be a full, complete, solid block. They were kind of little seams in the middle. But I did that to show what happens when you don't do it properly. But it's not a big deal. It's only pain. Man, I don't know what I'm doing. But regardless, while you won't get the nicest gourmet layers you see in those fancy French bakeries, this will still work out a-okay. Although I am noticing the fancy, expensive butter rolls out much nicer than our cheap butter, which would probably indicate with the extra percentage of butter fat. But we're gonna put this in the fridge for another hour before we roll it out, bake it, and then we'll see if the butter does something for the flavor. So finally, we're at our home stretch. Before we roll it out, let's prepare our baking sheets. And a little grease, flour on our work surface. So for our final roll, we're gonna want this around 10 inches wide and as long as it goes till it's about a 1/4 inch thick. And as you roll it, you can lift it up, dust some flour, just so it doesn't smush into the table. Alright, so both of these are about 1/4 inch thick. And all we need to do is cut these into triangles. Now, a good way of doing this, I would say take about 4 inches, make a notch, 4 inches, make a notch, something like that. And then on the other half, you just split the difference. And again, depending on how large you want it, you could do even bigger, you could do even smaller. And then all we're gonna do, meet those corners. If you got a pizza dough cutter, that make things really nice too. Of course, by the end pieces, because this is not a perfect square, rectangle, be creative. So these are gonna be big boys, big garçons. All right, not the prettiest, but I ain't no professional, but this will do just fine. Now, what do we do here? Let's take one of our triangles, super pretty, but it's gonna taste really good. I'm gonna put a slit here. This will help it cook evenly. Get a little bit of wider base, pull that here. All right, long end, just stretch it just ever so slightly. Grab this and roll it into itself. Make sure our tip is at the bottom. Wow, these aren't pretty at all. And then for our end pieces that are kind of misshaped, be creative with it. You don't need to see these ones. All right, so here we have our croissants. Some of them prettier than others. That's what you get for not knowing what you're doing. So here we have our fancy, expensive butter. And here we have our regular poverty butter. So we're gonna cover these, let these proof. If your oven has a proof function, just slap them in there. If not, you can just cover this with paper towel. If you got some extra trays, cover them like this. So we're just gonna set these aside in a warm place and wait until they get to double their size. All right, so it's been about an hour now. Take a look at our croissants. Wow, these ones are quite ugly. This one's okay. That's nice. That's pretty nice. I don't like that one. But we've seen these have risen and are basically double the size, so they are ready to bake. But first, before we do that, we're gonna put an egg wash on this. So using some of our egg whites from earlier in the recipe, all we need to do is grab that egg white, a little splash of water, and that should be good to go. This just gives it a nice little coat, protection for a nice glow. Wow, this one's really ugly. All right. All these have an egg wash on them. I slap them in the oven, 400 Fahrenheit for about 15-20 minutes until they're golden brown and the internal temp is at least 205 degrees. Oh, yeah. Not bad. Not bad. Huh, these ones look so much nicer than these ones. These smell so good though. Butter. Gonna have to let these cool off just a bit before we could dig in. But you know what? These seem pretty good. Pretty good. So we got our two croissants. This is our cheap butter, our expensive butter. Now visually, mostly the same. I'm not very good at shaping and making these. But what really matters is how they taste. Start with our cheap butter. That's good. I don't know. I don't know what this extra butter is gonna do. We will find out. Okay. All right. Wow. First off, this This is really good. But this is excellent. Oh, wow. Wow. Just, there's like more of a richness to it. Like a creamier taste. It's just this, but like better. But here's the question. Is it worth it to get double the price butter of the cheap butter? That's up to you. If you could afford, want to splurge on that nice butter, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. But using cheap butter, subpar technique, when they come fresh out of the oven, this is still very good. So I hope you give these a try. Croissants really aren't that bad. While I'm no master at making this, perhaps you could master it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the butter. It's about you. You're worth it.